All right, guys, we will be discussing the classifications of living organisms, including infectious agents. So, all of our organisms are classified in a specific place because not one organism is the same as another organism. They have different things that make them unique. So, we're going to talk about that a little bit today. And here are some ways that scientists classify and organize things. So, for example, the periodic table. We've got metals, nonmetals, metalloids. That's a way to classify our elements. There's other ways to classify the elements. We've got body systems. So, for example, like the lungs do something different than the intestines do and the heart does. So, they are under different classification. And then our last picture here is of interactions in aquatic life. So how do they interact with each other? They have a certain system as well. So these are all different systems that scientists have used already. Now, how do we classify living organisms? So looking at this picture here, the most obvious way to classify the organisms is by species. So we've got a dog and we've got cats, right? Dogs, cats. Then if we wanted to even classify it even more than that, then we could say, okay, by color. We've got some orange cats. They would fall in a certain category together. Then we got some white doggies and we got some brown cats. We could classify it by puppies and kittens. And then, there's just so many different ways we could classify these animals. So now I want you to try to classify these organisms. So looking at the pictures here, I want you to think of one way you could classify these different organisms. I'll give you about a second. Okay, now how I classified it was like this. I classified the blue together, I classified the red together, and then in the middle is blue and red. So it's a little bit of both. That's I just like color schemes, so that kind of worked with my brain. You might have classified it differently. You could have classified it by species. So we've got our fish, we've got our butterfly, we've got our birds. And I'm sure there might be even another way you classified it. So there's all sorts of different ways that you could classify organisms. And we're going to talk about how scientists do that. And the most basic classification system is based on domains and kingdoms. Organisms are classified into domains or kingdoms based on the following characteristics. So whether they are unicellular or multicellular, are they composed of one cell or multiple cells? Whether they are prokaryotic or eukaryotic, prokaryotics do not have a nucleus, whereas eukaryotics has a nucleus. Whether they have a cell wall or cell membrane, whether they have membrane-bound organelles, whether they are autotrophic or heterotrophic. Autotrophic means they make their own food. Heterotrophic means they have to consume things in order to get their energy. They get their energy from something else. They don't make their own food. Autotrophic makes food, heterotrophic does not. Whether they produce sexually or asexually, so if they're undergoing sexual reproduction, that means they need another organism to produce offspring, and then asexually means they do not need another organism to produce offspring. How they tolerate heat, salt, or other extreme conditions. So our three basic classification domains are here. We've got like a little Venn, or not Venn diagram, but like a little spider web. And domains are Basic, exactly how it says. It is the most inclusive, but the least specific. So it's kind of like a general category. We've got archaea, also known as archaeobacteria. We've got eubacteria, or also known as bacteria. And then we got eukaryota, and that's also called eukarya. Then, underneath domains is a more specific category called kingdoms. And kingdoms further divide the organisms by their characteristics. So, bacteria is still bacteria kingdom. Archaea is still archaea kingdom. And then eukaryota breaks down into 4 kingdoms. There's fungi, protista, plantae, and animalia. And we'll talk about what that means in a moment. But let's kind of understand each domain. So domain archaea. Archaea means ancient bacteria. Organisms in archaea are unicellular, prokaryotic, autotrophic or heterotrophic, organisms that reproduce asexually, bacteria that have adapted to extreme environments. Some can survive in extremely hot environments, like around hot springs and gyres. They are called thermophiles. Some can survive in extremely salty environments. The Great Salt Lake in Utah is an example. And they're called haliophiles. So if you look at this picture here, archaea thrive in this sort of extreme environment. And domain archaea has a kingdom, and that's also called archaea, which we already said. Here is just a bigger picture of an example of a hot spring that is in the Firestone River in Yellowstone. And if you look closely, you can see the different colors, and that's where the archaea is. It kind of presents those colors because of the extreme conditions that it lives in. Then we have domain bacteria. Many are common infectious agents, meaning it can infect a host, causing them to possibly be sick. They are unicellular, prokaryotic, autotrophic and heterotrophic, or heterotrophic, not and, sorry. Organisms that reproduce asexually. The most abundant organisms on Earth. One bacterium can give rise to 10 million in 24 hours. That's crazy. So, for example, you are sick, you don't wash your hands, you're coughing on everything, and then you go and, I don't know, shake hands with another person. Well, now that person has that bacteria, and then it keeps going. And then you get into a pandemic, kind of like what we're in now. Very, very abundant. Found in almost every habitat on Earth. The domain bacteria has one kingdom, and that is also called bacteria or eubacteria. Means the same thing. So here's an example of a bacteria on skin. It's like on a hair follicle. So you see the little bacteria cells around this hair follicle here, and they're just kind of hanging out on this hair follicle. Now we get into domain eukaryota, or eukarya. They are eukaryotic cells. They're very diverse, unicellular or multicellular, autotrophic or heterotrophic, can reproduce sexually or asexually, and they are split into 4 kingdoms: protista, fungi, plantae, and animalia. They're very diverse because humans are not super like mushrooms, but they fall in the same domain because what makes them up. But then you've got to split it up because obviously they're not the same, and we're going to talk about that. So here's the breakdown of the 4 kingdoms in eukaryota. We've got protista. They are mostly unicellular and microscopic. They are autotrophic and heterotrophic. They can be infectious agents. Examples: amoeba, algae, daphnia, plasmodium, which causes malaria. Plantae, they are multicellular green plants, autotrophic through photosynthesis, and have a cell wall. Some examples: mosses, ferns, trees, and flowering plants. Then we got fungi. Multicellular, heterotrophic. They are decomposers. They break down dead organisms. They can be infectious agents. Examples: mushrooms, athlete's foot, bread mold. Kind of gross, but that's fungi for you. And then animalia. We've got multicellular animals, heterotrophic, no cell wall. Examples: insects, spiders, crabs, birds, and of course, us, humans. So we've got a little cool diagram here that shows you the breakdown. So domains: most inclusive, least specific. Archaea, eubacteria or bacteria, and eukaryota. And then we've got our kingdoms: archaea, bacteria, protista, fungi, plantae, and animalia. And it keeps going on. This classification system gets more and more specific as it goes down in categories. So, kind of a review slide here. I want you to think, while I'm reading, what you think the answer is. So, this microscopic and one-celled organism lives in colonies with millions of others like it. It does not have a nucleus and cannot survive in extreme conditions. It could be an infectious agent. Okay, so let's think about our domains. Where would a single-cell organism fall under? We know it's not eukaryota because they are multicellular. So that kind of takes that one out. So then we're left with archaea and bacteria. Archaea, though, live in extreme conditions. This organism that this question is describing says cannot live, right here, in extreme conditions. So that kind of takes out archaea. Now we're left with domain bacteria. And then, of course, domain bacteria's kingdom is bacteria. So it'd be domain bacteria, kingdom bacteria. Now the last one. This organism is multicellular, decomposer. Its cells have a nuclei or nucleus. So, multicellular. We already know archaea and bacteria are unicellular. So that kind of takes them out, and we're left with eukaryota. So we know the domain is eukaryota. Now what is the kingdom? Decomposer, breaks down dead organisms. Kind of like mold and mushrooms and, all those decomposers. So that falls under the fungi kingdom. So we got domain eukaryota, and then we've got kingdom fungi. All right. For your assignment today in Google Classroom, you're going to have the same exact type of questions. There's only 2, just like this. They're different, obviously. You're going to have to figure out what domain it falls under and what kingdom it falls under, and then you will turn it in. All right, guys. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time.